3 of the 10 plants in this video were pulled from major nursery catalogs over the past decade, not because they stopped growing well, but because they only need to be bought once. Most gardeners with a balcony, a patio, or a strip of concrete out back have never heard of half of what's coming, not because these plants are rare, but because urban gardening for small spaces doesn't sell as many trays of annuals as a big, sprawling border does. In this video, I'll show you 10 plants that turn a cramped patio, a narrow balcony, or a shady side yard into something that actually looks planned without needing a single raised bed, a landscaper, or a weekend you don't have. Stay until the end. The last plant is a hidden gem most gardeners scroll straight past in the catalog, and it might be the one that changes how you think about a shady corner forever. And around the halfway mark, I'll share something about vertical growing that the nursery industry has been quietly hoping small space gardeners never work out for themselves. This list didn't come from a glossy spring catalog. It came from 3 years of testing plants on a 9 square meter balcony and a shaded London terrace, killing a few things that should have worked, and keeping notes on what actually survived a heat wave, a hard frost, and a landlord who forgot to water anything for 2 weeks in July. Every plant here has already failed somewhere, on someone's patio before it made this list. So, it doesn't have to fail on yours. Nothing on it requires a garden design degree, a big budget, or more than a few pots and a bit of sun. Plant number 1, dwarf panicle hydrangea bulbul for years. Hydrangeas got written off as a big garden plant, something you needed 6 feet of border even to attempt. Garden centers kept pushing the giant varieties because they photographed well on a display bench and quietly ignored the fact that a dwarf version existed that never asks for more than a large pot. This variety tops out at around 75 centimeters tall, roughly knee height on most adults, and still produces flower cones the size of a large grapefruit, which is a wildly generous bloom-to-plant ratio for something that fits on a balcony rail. If you've ever bought a compact shrub that quietly grew into a monster by year 3, this is the fix. It stays small permanently, needs no pruning to keep its shape, and rewards you with blooms from midsummer straight through into autumn without a single trip back to the nursery. In the US, it's hardy in zones 3 through 8, so nearly the entire country can grow it in the ground or a pot. Plant in early spring once the last frost has passed, or in early autumn in milder zones. In the UK, it's fully hardy. No winter protection needed anywhere in the country. Plant between March and May, or in September and October, while soil is still warm. In Canada, it handles down to roughly minus 35 degrees Celsius once established, making it one of the few hydrangeas that shrugs off a prairie winter. Plant after the ground has thawed in spring and mulch the base heavily for the first winter. Here's the part most people miss. Unlike big leaf hydrangeas, this variety blooms on new wood, which means even a brutal winter that kills back the stems won't cost you a single flower the following summer. You can cut it right down, and it comes back blooming. Owning one of these on a small balcony says something quietly, that you figured out how to get big garden drama out of a space the size of a parking spot. That kind of patience pays off fast, and it pays off even faster with the plant that comes next, one that spreads sideways instead of up and fills every gap in your paving for free. Plant number 2, creeping thyme. Creeping thyme has been sitting in the herb section of garden centers for decades, mislabeled as a kitchen plant, while its real talent, replacing grass in tiny gaps and gravel gardens, got completely ignored by anyone selling turf or bark mulch. There's no profit in a ground cover that fills in permanently and never needs replacing. A single small plug of creeping thyme will spread to cover roughly 30 centimeters across within one growing season, about the size of a dinner plate, and it does that without a drop of fertilizer. For anyone who's spent a weekend pulling weeds from between patio slabs, this is the plant that ends that chore for good. Once it's established, it outcompetes weeds simply by covering the ground first, and it can be walked on occasionally without complaint, releasing a faint herby scent underfoot. In the US, it's hardy in zones 4 through 9, covering nearly the whole country. Plant plugs in mid-spring once frost risk has passed. In the UK, it's rated fully hardy. Plant from April through June for the fastest establishment before winter. In Canada, it's revised down to Zone 3 with reliable snow cover acting as natural insulation. Plant in late spring and avoid heavy mulch, which can trap moisture and rot the crown. Most people don't realize this plant actually prefers poor, gritty soil. Feed it rich compost and it grows leggy and weak, which is the exact opposite of nearly every other plant on your patio. There's a particular kind of quiet confidence in a garden with no bare gaps left for weeds to find. That's the gardener this plant makes you. Now, from something that spreads flat across the ground, let's go to a plant that does the opposite. It climbs, and it solves a problem almost every small space gardener has stared at without an answer. Number 3. Compact Clematis, Diamond Ball, or similar patio variety. Full-size clematis got a reputation for being fussy, sprawling monsters that need 6 meters of trellis, so the compact patio varieties bred specifically for pots got buried at the back of the nursery, past the roses everyone already recognized. That's a shame because the small varieties solve the exact problem most balconies have. No horizontal space, but plenty of vertical wall. A compact clematis will comfortably climb 1.2 to 1.5 meters in a single season, about the height of most balcony railings, while producing upwards of 30 individual blooms from one plant in a 30-centimeter pot. If your balcony feels flat and one-dimensional, no matter how many pots you cram onto the floor, this is the fix, because it uses the one part of your space nobody else is using, the air above your railing. In the U.S., it's hardy in zones 4 through 9. Plant in early spring, keeping the roots shaded and the flowers in sun, the classic cool feet, warm face rule. In the UK, it's fully hardy. Plant March to May, and again in September for a head start on next year. In Canada, it's reliable to Zone 3 with winter mulch protection over the root ball. Plant once the soil has warmed in late spring to avoid transplant shock and a lingering cold snap. The trick almost nobody mentions. Plant it slightly deeper than the pot it came in, burying the first set of leaf nodes. This protects the crown if clematis wilt strikes, letting the plant regrow from underground even if the top dies back. Training a plant to climb your own railing instead of buying a trellis full of plastic flowers says you're building something that gets better every year, not something you'll throw out in October. We're only 3 plants in, and honestly, plant number 7 surprised me more than any of the others when I finally tried it in a shaded corner that I thought was a lost cause. That vertical trick works even better once you understand what's happening underground with the next plant. A foliage plant that solves the problem of every shady, forgotten corner. Plants number 4, Coral Bells. Huchera coral bells spent years being treated as a filler plant, something to tuck behind the real flowers, because the industry built its marketing around blooms, and this plant's real value is its leaves, which don't photograph as dramatically on a seed packet. That's a mistake almost every small space gardener with a shady spot ends up making, because coral bells solve a problem. Flowers can't color where the sun never reaches. A single Huchera plant holds its color, anything from deep burgundy to lime green to near black, for around 11 months of the year, which is longer than most flowering plants stay interesting combined. If you've got a north-facing balcony or a shaded side passage that's always looked dead compared to the sunny side of the house, this ends that. It doesn't need a single flower to earn its spot. The foliage alone does the work, all year, in exactly the light most plants refuse. In the U.S., it's hardy in zones 4 through 9. Plants in spring or early autumn, it actually prefers the cooler shoulder seasons over peak summer heat. In the UK, it's fully hardy. Plant anytime from March through October, avoiding the deepest frost weeks. In Canada, it's reliable to Zone 3 with a decent snow blanket. Without one, mulch heavily. Plant in spring once the soil has softened. Most people plant it in full sun because that's the display bench habit garden centers taught everyone. But the darker varieties actually scorch and fade in strong midday sun and hold their richest color in the exact partial shade most balconies already have. A gardener who can make a shady corner the best-looking spot on the whole street has quietly stopped playing by everyone else's sunlight rules. If foliage color in the shade sounds almost too easy, wait until you see what this next plant does with a spot most people have already given up on entirely. Plant number 5. Lavender. Munstead lavender is sold everywhere in spring, then quietly discontinued from most compact catalogs by midsummer because the fast-growing hybrid types die back within 2 or 3 years and need replacing, which suits the industry's replanting cycle just fine. Munstead is the variety that breaks that cycle, and it rarely gets pushed as hard because it simply doesn't need buying twice. A single established Munstead plant can live for 12 to 15 years in the same pot with nothing but an annual trim, compared with the 2 to 3 year lifespan of the showier hybrid lavenders stacked at the front of most nurseries. For anyone who has bought lavender 3 springs running because it just died each winter, this ends the cycle. It's the hardiest true lavender available. It tolerates the neglect of a busy summer, and it fills a small pot with scent from June through August without a single feed. In the US, it's hardy in zones 5 through 9. Plant in spring after the last frost, in the sunniest, driest spot available. In the UK, it's fully hardy, the classic English cottage variety. Plant March to May in free-draining compost. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 5, and worth extra grit in the pot in colder zone 4 gardens to keep roots from sitting wet through freeze-thaw cycles. One caution for colder prairie regions, without excellent drainage, winter wet, not cold, is what actually kills it, so raised pots outperform ground planting there. The detail almost nobody tells you: never cut lavender back into old brown wood. It won't regrow from there. Trim only the green growth just after flowering, and the plant renews itself for another decade instead of turning woody and bare. A pot of lavender that's outlived 3 of your neighbor's replacements says you've learned the difference between buying a plant and investing in one. That's 5 down, and here's the part I promised earlier, about the one trick that changes vertical growing entirely, coming up in the next segment. Speaking of getting more out of less space, the next plant is one you can actually eat, and it might be the single best return on a small pot on this entire list. Plants number 6 to 6 to 20 fade. Ever-bearing strawberries. Ever-bearing strawberries got pushed out of most small garden marketing in favor of June-bearing varieties, which produce one big showy harvest that photographs well for a single catalog spread, but then goes quiet for the rest of the year. Ever-bearing types do the opposite, and they never got the same spotlight, probably because a steady trickle of fruit all season doesn't make for one dramatic harvest photo. A single hanging basket of ever-bearing strawberries can produce fruit in 3 separate flushes between May and October, meaning roughly 5 months of harvest from one basket you bought once. If you've ever paid nearly $5 for a small punnet of strawberries that were half moldy by the time you got them home, this solves that permanently. One basket, hung at eye level on a balcony rail, keeps producing handfuls of fruit through the whole warm season, and the trailing habit means it looks decorative even when it's not fruiting. In the US, it's hardy in zones 4 through 8. Plant in early spring for a first flush by early summer. In the UK, it's fully hardy. Plant March to April, or start with young cold-stored runners for fruit within weeks. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 3 with winter mulch or by moving pots into an unheated shed over the coldest months. Plant once night frosts have passed in late spring. The tip most people never hear: pinch off the very first flush of flowers in year 1. It feels wasteful, but it forces the plant to put energy into roots instead of fruit, which more than doubles the harvest in every year after. Growing your own fruit on a balcony the size of a parking space is a small, stubborn kind of independence most people assume needs a whole garden to earn. We're just past the halfway point, and plant number 9 is the one I genuinely didn't expect to make this list until I tested it myself. That kind of quiet independence is exactly the theme running to the next plant too, one that thrives on being ignored almost entirely. Plant number 7, Sedum Autumn Joy. Sedum Autumn Joy spent a long stretch out of fashion, dismissed by trend-driven planting guides as an old-fashioned granny plant, while the same guides pushed thirsty annuals that needed daily watering through every heat wave. That dismissal never made sense, because this is one of the only plants on the market bred by drought itself, not by a breeder chasing a trend. A mature clump of autumn joy can go 3 full weeks without rain or watering in a container and show no visible stress, which is longer than most people's entire summer holiday. For anyone who's come home from a 2-week trip to a balcony full of crispy dead annuals, this is the plant that's still there waiting for you. It needs no deadheading, no feeding, and no daily attention. And it still delivers a 2-stage color show, pale green summer flower heads that deepen to a rich rust pink by early autumn. In the US, it's hardy in zones 3 through 9, covering the whole continent essentially. Plant in spring or early autumn in free-draining potting mix. In the UK, it's fully hardy, one of the toughest ratings available. Plant anytime from spring through early autumn. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 3, genuinely one of the most cold and drought-tolerant perennials sold anywhere in the country. Plant in spring once the soil has thawed. The detail most gardeners never act on, leave the dried flower heads standing right through winter. Instead of cutting them back, they hold an architectural silhouette through frost and snow, giving you a plant that still looks intentional in January. A balcony that still looks composed after 2 weeks of total neglect belongs to a gardener who stopped needing everything to be perfect to feel proud of it. From a plant that thrives on neglect, the next one solves the opposite problem, structure and shape, all year without a single flower to manage. Plant number 8, dwarf boxwood green mountain. Dwarf boxwood rarely gets recommended for small spaces because full-size boxwood has a reputation for needing constant shaping with shears, and nobody bothered to mention that the dwarf, naturally conical varieties barely need trimming at all. That reputation cost an entire generation of small space gardeners the one plant that gives a patio year-round structure without a single seasonal gap. Green mountain boxwood grows in a naturally neat, cone-like shape and only adds around 8 to 10 centimeters of height a year, roughly the width of a smartphone. So a single light trim every year or two keeps it tidy indefinitely. If your patio looks bare and unfinished every winter once the flowering plants have died back, this is the fix because it's evergreen, holds its shape through every season, and gives your eyes something structured to land on even in the dead of January. In the US, it's hardy in zones 5 through 9. Plant in spring or early autumn, avoiding the height of summer heat for transplanting. In the UK, it's fully hardy, the traditional English formal garden plant scaled down. Plant March to May or September to October. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 5 and best given a sheltered spot away from harsh winter wind in zone 5 gardens, specifically since windburn, not cold, is the main risk. Plant in spring once frost risk has passed. The insider detail: water it deeply but infrequently rather than little and often. Shallow, frequent watering encourages the fine surface roots that make boxwood vulnerable to drying out in a hot summer wind. A patio with real structure, in a container, without a hedge trimmer in sight, marks you out as someone who plans a garden instead of just filling it. Structure is one thing, but the next plant brings motion and color to that same structure. In the exact months most people think their patio has nothing left to offer. Plant number 9, dwarf butterfly bush. Lo and behold, blue chip, full-size butterfly bush, earned a bad reputation for growing 3 meters tall and self-seeding aggressively. In some regions, it's genuinely classed as invasive, so an entire dwarf sterile breeding line quietly solved that exact problem, and almost nobody heard about it. This variety was specifically bred not to set seed, which removes the one real objection to growing butterfly bush at all. Blue chips tops out at around 60 to 75 centimeters tall and wide, small enough for a large pot, yet a single plant can attract more than a dozen butterfly visits in one afternoon during peak summer bloom. If you wanted a wildlife-friendly balcony, but assumed you needed a real garden to attract pollinators, this plant proves you don't. It blooms non-stop from June through the first frost, needs no deadheading to keep flowering, and turns a small pot into the busiest patch of a whole street for bees and butterflies. In the US, it's hardy in zones 5 through 9. Plant in spring, and note that in zones 5 and 6 it may die back to the ground in winter, but reliably resprouts from the roots. In the UK, it's fully hardy. Plant March to May in full sun for the heaviest bloom. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 5 with a mulched root zone. One caution for colder zone 3 and 4 regions of Canada, where it's best treated as a dieback perennial rather than a true shrub, and may need extra root protection to return reliably. Plant in late spring once frosts have passed. the detail most retailers skip entirely because this variety is bred sterile. It produces almost no viable seed, which is exactly why it can be grown responsibly in regions where the wild species is restricted or discouraged. Filling a small space with butterflies instead of just flowers says you've started gardening for something bigger than your own view from the window. One plant left after this next one, and it's the hidden gem I've been building towards since the very first minute of this video. Everything so far has been about getting more out of less, more bloom, more structure, more harvest, more wildlife, all from a space most people had written off. The last plant takes that idea somewhere most gardeners never think to look at all. And now, the one I promised you at the very start. I saved this for last because it's the plant that convinced me small shaded corners aren't a limitation at all. They're just an unused opportunity. Most gardeners scroll straight past it in the catalog because it doesn't flower loudly and it gets filed under ground cover for difficult shade, which sounds like a consolation prize rather than a genuine feature plant. That's a mistake. This is plant number 10. Plant number 10 Tapenevian, also called barrenwort, the hidden gem. Epimedium has been quietly available in specialist nurseries for years while mainstream garden centers ignored it completely. Mostly because it doesn't bloom in the loud, obvious colors that sell trays of bedding plants at the entrance display. What it actually offers is something almost no other small space plant does. Real beauty in deep, dry shade, the one condition most balcony and courtyard gardeners assume is a dead end. A single epimedium clump can thrive in a spot that gets as little as 2 hours of direct light a day. And once established, it needs watering as little as once every 10 days, even through a warm spell. If you've got a shaded side passage or a north-facing courtyard corner where you've genuinely given up trying to grow anything, this is the plant that proves you gave up too early. Its heart-shaped leaves emerge tinted bronze in spring, turn a rich green through summer, and its delicate spurred flowers appear in shades of yellow, pink, or white in April. Right when almost nothing else in deep shade is doing anything at all. In the US, it's hardy in zones 4 through 9. Plant in early spring or early autumn directly into the ground or a large shaded container. In the UK, it's fully hardy. A classic English woodland garden plant rarely seen outside specialist collections. Plant September to April while the soil is workable. In Canada, it's reliable to zone 4 with a mulch layer for insulation. Plant in spring once the ground has thawed, in the shadiest spot you have. The detail that convinced me to grow it in the first place cut the old leathery leaves right back to the ground in late winter before the new flowers emerge. Leave them on, and the fresh spring blooms get hidden underneath last year's growth, which is the single most common reason people think this plant doesn't do much. Finding beauty in the one corner everyone else has written off isn't just a gardening skill. It's the exact quiet confidence this whole video has been building toward. So there you have it, 10 plants that turn urban gardening for small spaces from a compromise into an actual advantage. The dwarf hydrangea, creeping thyme, compact clematis, coral bells, Munstead lavender, everbearing strawberries, sedum autumn joy, dwarf boxwood, the sterile dwarf butterfly bush, and epimedium for the shade nobody else could use. Whether you're gardening in the US, the UK, or Canada, every one of these earns its place in a pot without demanding your whole weekend. No constant replanting, no complicated care routines, just a small space that looks composed in every season year after year, while everyone else is still reading the back of a seed packet at the garden center. If you're the kind of gardener who'd rather plant once and enjoy a space for a decade instead of restarting every spring, subscribe. We share guides exactly like this every week, built for small gardens, balconies, and courtyards that most channels ignore entirely. Drop a comment below. Which of these 10 are you trying first? I read every single one.